Welcome back. This is lesson 5 of the MoneyWise series. Today we're talking about our live score and specifically about our spending on our daily needs and wants. Have you ever been hesitant to want to track your spending or to budget? Why is that? I've been there. I think it's because we're afraid of what it's going to show us. We'd rather just not know. We'd rather bury our heads in the sand and act like it's not a problem. But we need to know. We need to be aware. We're not going to be able to take the next step until we get honest and take a look at where our money is really going. Back in the 1500s, there was an explorer named Martin Frobisher. He was from England, and he was exploring what is modern-day Canada. And in his explorations, he came across this black ore, shiny black ore. He immediately recognized it as the most precious resource any explorer could hope to find: gold. And so he returned with 200 tons back to England of this ore to be smelted, and of course it was going to make him a very, very rich man. People were so overjoyed, so enthusiastic about the possibility of this new gold mine in Canada that for the next year he was going to return and he was going to put way more effort into the mining expedition. The Queen of England herself was one of the backers financially of this expedition, so he returned with many more ships, and the next year they brought back 1,400 tons of this ore. Unfortunately for Martin Frobisher, it was only after that second year they returned to England that it was discovered what he had really found. It wasn't gold at all. It was pyrite. We know it better today as fool's gold. Like, how absolutely disappointing. Can you imagine being in Martin Frobisher's position, thinking that you've hit the jackpot of all jackpots, only to find out that all of this stuff that you've spent the last couple of years transporting and working so hard to secure is worthless. Absolutely worthless. And in our own finances, I really want us to avoid falling into the same trap. How sad would it be to go years and years, decades and decades, and to look back at our spending, to look back at how we used our money, and to come to the conclusion that so much of it was just worthless? What was I doing? What was I spending my money on? Where did it all go? I don't want that to be the case for you. And so in order for us to take that next step, in order for us to do a good job with our live score, we need to take a closer look and see where it is that our money is going. Now, we already talked about budgeting, and I know that for some, budgeting, you've had a bad experience with it, but let's reframe the conversation. Budgeting is not a bad thing. Budgeting is a tool that helps you to prioritize the really important things so that you can be happy and content and fulfilled about where your money is going, and not feeling like Martin Frobisher and wondering, why did I spend so much time and effort on things that were worthless, right? We want to eliminate the things that really don't have value and don't add value to our lives. Should everybody have a budget? Now, I think if you're struggling with your cash flow, if you don't have a good sense of where your money is going, then absolutely. Now, if you're in a position where you have a good sense of your cash flow, you don't have high interest debt, you have an emergency fund in place, maybe you can slip into more tracking mode. There's a difference between budgeting and tracking. Budgeting is being proactive ahead of time and planning out and specifying where your money will go in the upcoming month. Tracking is simply looking periodically on a monthly basis and seeing where your money did go. Here's the key. 80% of the value of a budget is awareness. That's really what we're doing. We're building awareness. There's something about having to look about where your money is going and knowing how much you're spending in certain areas that will alter your behavior. And so when I've done budgeting in the past, I've done it transaction by transaction. I found that to be the most effective way for me to budget. Instead of looking and just tracking and saying, okay, where did my money go? Because it's easy for me to gloss over that and not really confront those individual transactions. So when I've budgeted, what I do is I'll go into my credit card statement and my bank statement, and I will manually type in every single transaction that I've had for that month and categorize it where it should go. And when my spending is beyond where it should be, I know about it. It's no secret because I have to type in every single transaction, and that helps me going forward for the next month to be a lot more mindful, a lot more aware, and a lot more purposeful in how I'm spending my money. Back in 1992, there was this cargo ship that was traveling over the Pacific Ocean, and it ran into bad weather and it capsized. And on board, there were several containers of rubber ducks, and the containers came loose, fell into the ocean, and thousands of rubber ducks fell into the water. And this was actually a super helpful thing for oceanographers and for people who study kind of how ocean currents work, because they were able to track where those rubber ducks ended up. And it was amazing the results of where these rubber ducks went. They found, of course, because they could track, they could know based on the markings on the rubber duck that it was from this cargo ship. They found them in Australia, in China, in Japan, South America, the United States, not just the West Coast. Some of them made it all the way up through the Arctic Ocean, came around to the United Kingdom, to the eastern coast of the United States. They ended up all over the world. Those little rubber ducks drifted for years and years. And it's kind of a funny story. But remember how we talked about drifting in your finances, right? How when we're out of alignment, our finances start to drift. And unfortunately for a lot of us, we're kind of like the rubber ducks on the ocean. We're just going wherever the current's taking us. Whatever advertisements we see, whatever our coworkers or our friends or our family tell us, we just have no aim, no purpose, just going with the flow. And that's not the way to live in our finances. And it's certainly not the way to reach our goals or our financial why, is by being adrift in our finances. One thing that we all have to be aware of, and I would encourage you to look out for, is lifestyle creep. Now, what is lifestyle creep? Basically, the idea is as your income increases, there is this natural tendency for us to increase our standard of living to whatever our new income is. So, okay, we get a raise, get a new job, we're making more money, now we get a nicer car. We move to a nicer house. We upgrade our phone. We buy some new clothes. We go on nicer vacations. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that over time as your income increases to increase your standard of living. But here's what we have to be very careful for. First of all, if we're not purposeful, lifestyle creep will just take up all the room of our increased income and crowd out our ability to save or to give. So if we're not being purposeful, we'll always find ways to spend that money. It's amazing to me. People think, they made $50,000, now they're making $100,000, and they thought when they were making 50 that once they got to 100, they would have so much extra money. But they get $100,000 and that doesn't happen. And then they have $200,000 and they're still spending, and $300,000. There's people in our world today that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, millions of dollars a year, and they find ways to spend it all. There's always going to be ways to spend that money. You're always going to find avenues for spending if you want to. So be careful about lifestyle creep, because if you're not being purposeful about it, it will crowd out your ability to give and save to the extent that you want. But also, lifestyle creep makes you accustomed to a certain standard of living that makes it very hard to adjust to if your financial situation has to take a step back for any reason. If there's a loss of a job, if there's a decrease in income, one spouse stops working, if there's an economic pullback, if anything happens to your income, all of a sudden you feel like you can't adjust because you feel you're owed this standard of living. Be very careful about lifestyle creep and how it can seep its way into our daily finances. So in order to budget or to track your money, in your participant guide are several resources that I would recommend, different tools, different budgeting apps that I've used before. Find the one that works for you. There's even an Excel spreadsheet. You can just do a simple Google search online and find plenty of handouts if you want to do the paper and pen route. I'm kind of a budgeting tool agnostic in the sense that I don't think there's one specific tool you have to use, one app that's far and away better. Find what works for you. What I'm concerned about is that you find something that's sustainable, that resonates with you, and that you can work with to make sure that you're planning and tracking and having awareness of where your money is going. So why does it matter how we spend our money? What's the big deal here? Well, let's remind ourselves of a few things. Number one, let's go back to our previous episode at the very beginning. God is the owner, right? Remember, it's not our money that we're spending, it's His money. And number two, we are the manager. So yes, we do get to make the calls. We do get to make the decisions. Nobody's going to make them for us. But number three, we are accountable. There's responsibility. There's coming a day where we have to explain why we made the choices that we made. And if you're the manager of a location, then you understand that very well, that there are performance reports and there's a yearly evaluation. There's systems in place for any manager where they have to give an account for the job that they've been doing. And if they're not doing a good job, they're probably not going to be in that position very much longer. So really what we want to do is we want to spend our money in such a way that we would be happy to report to God, hey, here's how I'm doing with your money. Here's the analogy that I think of. In our house, my kids' rooms are constantly dirty. And every now and then, of course, we have them clean up their room, and it doesn't last very long because that's just kids' natural state, is not to keep things clean for very long. But sometimes, especially our older kids, and Jaden, my oldest, will just have this fit of responsibility where he just, something comes over him and he just decides, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm just going to do something because I decide to do it. And he might go clean his room or help clean up the living room or do something helpful around the house. And whenever he does that, something very interesting happens. We don't have to find out about it. He will come and tell us. Maybe you can remember, or maybe you've experienced the same thing with your kids. When you take responsibility and you've done a good job, you invite inspection. Hey, come take a look. See what I've done, because I'm proud of it. But when you haven't done a good job, that's the worst thing in the world to hear. So how do we figure out our live score? Well, the live score is basically measuring how much we spend. So everything left over after giving, saving, debt, and taxes. In fact, I know we're covering this second. It's a lot easier to calculate your gifts or your live score if you leave it for last. But we're covering it second, and there's a reason for that, and you'll see why. But really, our spending, our live score, is our needs and our wants. Essentially, that's what we're talking about. The things that we have to spend on are absolute necessities, and then all the things that we want. And there's a lot of things that fit into that category. Let's give a quick example of how we might calculate a live score. Let's have somebody that has $2,000 a month worth of needs that they spend on and $1,500 a month on their wants. We add that up, and that's $3,500 a month. We multiply it times 12, that's $42,000 a year. For a household income of $100,000, that means we have a live score of 42%. So what are our needs? Well, these are really the non-negotiables, things that we have to spend money on, things like groceries, utilities, doctor's visits, clothes. We all need these basic necessities in life. But what are our wants? Well, the wants are all the other things. Entertainment, activities, hobbies, shopping, home decor. Like, the list goes on and on and on. There's so many things that can fit in the wants category. Now, what are good ranges for your live score? Well, between 30 to 45% would be an excellent range. 45 to 65% is good. 65 to 80% is fair. And 80% or higher would be low or poor. Now, there's lots of factors to consider. This is not a one-size-fits-all range. This is more to give you a general idea of, okay, if your live score falls within this range, this is generally speaking good, bad, or otherwise. Remember, everybody's situation is different. Cost of living, family size, household income. Okay, if you're empty nesters that live in Iowa and you have a six-figure income, well, your live score should probably look a lot different than a family of five who lives in Los Angeles and is in early career, right? So you have to consider all those factors. So please don't take it as, okay, if my score is in the fair category, that means I'm an abject failure and I must be doing something absolutely wrong. Just take all of these with a grain of salt. I more put these ranges to give you an idea of, ideally across the board, where would be good ranges to be in and where would not. So let's talk about some practical ways to increase your Live scoring. Well, first of all, start using a budgeting app like the resources that we listed in there. Find the one that works for you. Play around with others if you can. If you've tried budgeting in the past and you said, oh, I used this app and I used it for a while and I got away from it, okay, try a different one. If you've used paper and pen, try doing it online or try an app. If you've tried an app or doing it online and didn't work for you, try doing paper and pen. Find the system that works for you and then stick with that. Another simple thing that you can do is shop your insurance coverage. I'm talking primarily your auto or home coverage. I know we get commercials and advertisements all the time for insurance. I would encourage you to reach out to an insurance broker, somebody that can shop multiple carriers. What I found is a lot of times people get home or auto insurance and they just keep the same carrier for multiple years, not realizing that each year their rates are going up and they probably could save a good bit of money by switching. Be very careful though, make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. Switching from one auto carrier to another, the reason they may offer you a 30% discount is because they're changing the coverage levels. So make sure that you get the right coverage levels for auto and home, but I would say on a yearly basis, at least every 2 years, just go ahead and shop that and make sure that you're getting the best rates. Another thing is plan out your grocery shopping in advance. This might seem like such a simple thing, but it really can be very impactful. I would say more than any other category when it comes to people overspending monthly, almost always it's on food because it's such an easy category to overspend on. We have to have food, so we feel very justified in going to the grocery store, going out to the restaurant because, hey, what are we going to do? Not eat? And certainly, I want you to shop and I don't want you to go hungry, but be very purposeful and be very intentional when, especially doing your grocery shopping. Like for instance, don't go grocery shopping hungry. Bring a list. Again, I know these sound like really simple things, but you'd be amazed at just how when we get in bad habits, we go grocery shopping at inopportune times, or we just kind of go multiple times throughout the month instead of planning out our grocery shopping for the month, or we just swing by the grocery store to pick up a couple things, but then we inevitably find ourselves walking up and down the aisle and throwing 20 other things in the basket because they look really good and I'm really hungry right now. Be intentional, plan out your grocery shopping. That right there can save you a lot of money each month. The other category, of course, is restaurants. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not a big spender, but one area that I can always feel like I would like to spend more money on is going out to eat, going out to restaurants. That's just something that I enjoy. And that's fine. If you want to build that into your budget, I'm not saying don't go out to eat, but just know how much you're willing to spend on that in a given month and stick to that. You'd be amazed sometimes when people are not tracking their spending, they'll look at their statement at the end of the year or at the end of the month, and I'll ask them, how much do you think you spend on going out to eat? I'm like, oh, not much, maybe $300-400, and then you start looking and adding up the transactions, and people are like, wow, I never realized, I just didn't even know, because we just get into our habits, our routine, we're busy, we're gonna pull through the drive-thru, we're just gonna go out to eat tonight, we're just gonna order some pizza, and that really adds up over time. So have your limit, build it into your budget, and stick to that. Maybe you get 2 weeks into the month and it's like, oh, we only have $100 left in our restaurant budget. Okay, stay within that limit, cook at home a little bit more, and stay within those limits, and that'll be a big way to save money each month. Another simple one is to cancel unused subscriptions. Have you noticed everything is a subscription these days? Everything's a monthly cost. And if you're using it, great. If you're getting value from it, sure. But probably you have 2 or 3 or 4 subscriptions that you're just not using. You have it, maybe you use it every now and then, but let's be honest. If you have Amazon Prime and Hulu and Netflix and HBO and Disney and like all these different streaming services, you're not watching all of them. We're all doing the same thing. We get on them, we click around for half an hour, still can't find anything to watch. So choose a couple that you will use, get rid of the rest, but look at your subscriptions, cancel unused ones. That's a quick way to save yourself, $50, $100, $200 a month, just right there. Another one is to space out new purchases. Sometimes you need to get a new computer, you need to get a new phone, you need to get new shoes or a new outfit, and that's fine. But sometimes you just want to get those things. It's like, I could use it, but I don't actually have to have it right now. And so just by spacing out new purchases, that right there can save you a lot of money. I've got the iPhone 15 right now. I'm not going to get another iPhone for a couple of years. Why? Because I don't really need it. There's really not a huge difference between this iPhone or whatever the next one's going to be. So I'm going to hold off on that. So the more time and space that you can put between your transactions and your purchases, the better. And then another thing is to use the 24-hour rule. What's the 24-hour rule? Well, basically, anytime you're going to make a large purchase, and you have to determine what that is for yourself. Is that $100? Is that $500? Is that $1,000? Depending on your income level, that might change a little bit. But the 24-hour rule basically says, for those large purchases, I'm going to wait 24 hours before deciding yes. I'm not going to make any impulse purchases. I'm not going to go to the dealership and buy a car the same day. I'm not going to get on Amazon and fill up my cart with $500 worth of stuff and then click buy. I'm going to wait on those things. I'm going to give it 24 hours. And then if it still sounds like a good idea, if after 24 hours, I still feel like I should spend this money and this is a good deal, then I can click buy. And you'll be amazed sometimes when you just give a little bit of space, when you just give a little bit of time, all of a sudden the thing that in the moment felt like, yeah, I definitely want to get this thing, all of a sudden it's not as compelling 24 hours later. And that right there can save you a lot of money. So here's going to be your homework assignment for this week. Remember we did that exercise where we sorted all of our transactions into the different buckets? Now we're going to go to our live bucket. All of those transactions, our needs and our wants, I want you to look back through at least the last month up to the last 3 months. And look at each transaction, go one by one, and I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. Should I keep it? Should I prune it? Or should I fine tune it? Here's what I mean by that. Keep it, yeah, I'm spending money on there and I don't want to change that. I'm going to keep it. That's probably going to be most things. Prune it means I don't need this anymore. I'm wasting money on this thing. It's really not all that important to me. I'm going to cut it out. And fine tune it means I'm going to keep it. It's something I still want to spend on, but maybe I can be a little bit better. Maybe I can save a little bit more on that category. So let me give you a couple examples here. Like keep. Maybe you're taking music lessons right now. And you look at that and say, no, that's super valuable. It's something that I want to continue to do. I'm going to keep that. It's a non-negotiable. Great. Well, then you maybe get to one of those streaming services and you realize, yeah, I'm really not using this. I can go ahead and cancel that. So I'm going to prune it. And then you come to your auto insurance. Well, I need to keep my auto insurance, but I haven't shopped it in 5 years. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to fine tune it. So remember, keep, prune, fine tune, look through all of your transactions from your needs and your wants. If you'll go through that exercise, I feel pretty confident to think that almost everybody taking this course can free up probably at least 50 to $100 right there, if not more. So next week, come prepared to discuss what you went through, what you discovered in that process, and what you were able specifically to prune or to fine tune. And next week, we're going to get into our O score, debt and taxes, lots of interesting things to explore there, and we'll jump into that next week.